Saddam Hussein's time in power was filled with wars, chemical attacks, and brutal punishments. But after many years of dictatorship, everything changed when the United States invaded Iraq in 2003. After the fall of Baghdad on April 9, 2003, Saddam Hussein suddenly disappeared. He evaded capture and went into hiding in central Iraq. For almost 8 months, he kept moving from place to place, staying in different kinds of safe houses and with people who remained loyal to him. He often hid near Tikrit, his hometown located in the province of Salah al-Din. The U.S. military, along with CIA agents and Iraqi informants, did not stop searching for him. Many people close to him were arrested and investigated, and each of them provided pieces of information that brought them closer to Saddam. U.S. forces believed that he was hiding in a small area near the Tigris River, so they focused their search on the towns of Adwar, Marat, and Tikrit. But before we start that, if you're new to our channel, please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any updates. Stay updated with videos like this. On December 13, 2003, U.S. forces launched a special operation called Operation Red Dawn, which was named after an American war movie from 1984. 2 locations were targeted simultaneously in the mission, which were named Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. These were farmhouses near Adwar, about 15 kilometers south of Tikrit, in an area called Tigrit. More than 600 soldiers from the 4th Infantry Division and Task Force 121, an elite unit composed of special operations teams, participated in the raid. They used helicopters, armored vehicles, and information from local sources. And in the end, it was a former bodyguard of Saddam who provided the exact location they had been waiting for. When the troops arrived at a small compound with high walls, they discovered a hole dug into the ground, hidden under piles of bricks and soil. It was about 6 to 8 feet deep, just enough for a person to lie down inside. This hidden burrow would later become famous around the world as what came to be called the Spider Hole. Inside the hole, that's where they found Saddam Hussein. He was thin and obviously weak. His hair was messy and his beard was long and gray. He was carrying a flashlight, a pistol, and a sack. There was almost $750,000 in cash. There were also 2 AK-47s near him, but he didn't use them. He didn't try to fight or escape, and he was immediately pulled out, tied up, and taken into custody. After his capture, Saddam was transferred to Camp Cropper, a U.S. military prison near Baghdad International Airport. This is a high-security facility for important prisoners. He was given the codename High-Value Detainee Number 1 and was placed in a very small cell. There was only one main piece of furniture, a metal bed with a thin mattress, a small sink, a toilet, and a light that was never turned off. The light was on 24 hours a day, so he could be constantly monitored. There were cameras and guards always watching. And he was not allowed to talk to other prisoners. He spent most of his time alone and was only allowed out into a small yard for 1 hour each day to walk. He was also allowed to have a few Arabic books, including the Quran, which he often read. He wrote many letters and records, and some of these were sent to his daughters who lived in Jordan. He was also frequently interrogated by American officials and intelligence officers, and one of them was FBI agent George Pirro, who interviewed him for several months in 2004. According to Pirro, Saddam was calm and very strategic. He did not show any remorse or fear, and he believed that in the end, history would regard him as a great leader and not as a criminal. From time to time, he also saw his lawyers from Iraq and other countries. He still continued to call himself the president of Iraq and never admitted that he did anything wrong. For him, he was only defending his country against its enemies, and even though he was imprisoned, he still acted as if he was in power. During this time, Iraq was going through a period of great change. The old Ba'ath Party was gone and a new government was starting to be built with the help of the United States. On June 28, 2004, the U.S. formally handed over legal custody of Saddam to the Iraqi interim government, led by Prime Minister Iyad Allawi. This means that Iraq's new legal system was now handling Saddam's case. However, there is a condition attached to this. Even though he is now under Iraqi law, Saddam will still remain in U.S. custody. After almost 2 years in prison, the trial of Saddam Hussein has finally begun. The court was called the Iraqi Special Tribunal. which was created to try the crimes committed by Saddam and the high-ranking officials of his regime. The trial formally began on October 19, 2005, inside the Green Zone in Baghdad, an area heavily guarded by U.S. and Iraqi forces. The first trial's main case focused on what happened in Dujail. Dujail is a small town of Shia Muslims, about 60 kilometers north of Baghdad. That year, Saddam was visiting the area, and while he was there, some members of a Shia group tried to assassinate him. They attacked Saddam's convoy, but he survived, and because of this, the president became angry. And in retaliation, he ordered a brutal crackdown. The security forces, led by Barzan Ibrahim al-Takriti, Saddam's brother and then head of Iraqi intelligence, arrested hundreds of residents. Many of them were young men or elderly people who were not involved, and they were accused of being part of the assassination plot even without evidence. From those arrested, 148 men and boys were sentenced to death. Most of them were executed in the following years, and many were brought to Abu Ghraib prison, where they were tortured or simply disappeared. Their houses and farms were also destroyed, and the entire town was punished. And because of this, the former president, Saddam Hussein, was charged with crimes against humanity because of what happened. This means he was accused of ordering widespread killings and torture of civilians. He was tried along with 7 other officials, including Barzan al-Takriti, Tassa Yassin Ramadan, his former vice president, and several local leaders of the Ba'ath Party from Dujail. These events are truly significant in Iraq. For the first time in the country's modern history, a former leader is being held accountable in court. The trials are being broadcast on television and millions of Iraqis are watching live. They saw Saddam, dressed in a suit, sitting inside a wooden box surrounded by guards. But the former president did not act like an ordinary defendant. He often shouted, challenged the judges, and delivered heated speeches. He refused to recognize the judges as legitimate, even calling them traitors. He insisted that the court was illegal because it was established while Iraq was still under U.S. occupation. He repeatedly said that he was still the president of Iraq and that the new government had no authority over him. Sometimes he would even stand up and wave at the cameras, argue with the prosecutors, and say that he had the right to punish anyone who tried to kill him. According to him, he was only defending Iraq against terrorists, and his confidence was obvious even though he was no longer in power. The judges also had a hard time, and many of them received death threats, with some being forced to resign. Another of the earlier presiding judges, Rizgard Muhammad Amin, resigned in early 2006 due to intense pressure. He was replaced by Rauf Abdurrahman, who was stricter and tried to control the courtroom. Despite the shouting and drama, the trials really continued. Witnesses came forward and survivors from Dujail recounted their experiences, the torture, the killings, and the disappearance of their families. Documents bearing Saddam's own signature authorizing the killings were also presented in court. After about a year and a half, the verdict was finally announced on November 5, 2006. The former president was found guilty of ordering the killings in Dujail, and because of these events, he was sentenced to death. Despite what happened, he even raised his fist and said that he was not afraid to die. He still thinks he's Iraq's true leader. After the verdict was announced, Saddam's legal team immediately filed an appeal, hoping that the verdict would be overturned or at least delayed. This appeal was brought to the Iraqi Appeals Court, which once again reviewed the entire trial and all the evidence. The court spent several weeks reviewing everything. However, on December 26, 2006, the Iraqi Appeals Court announced their final decision. The death sentence for Saddam Hussein was confirmed and signed. The court said he was guilty of crimes against humanity and that the sentence should be carried out immediately. There would be no further delays. The decision was final. According to Iraqi law, once the appeals court approves the death sentence, it must be carried out within 30 days. However, the Iraqi government really did not want to wait. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki clarified that as the head of the majority government, he would immediately carry out Saddam's death sentence. At that time, the Islamic holiday Eid al-Adha was approaching, a major religious celebration for Muslims. It usually involves prayers, charity, and time spent with family. In 2006, Eid al-Adha was expected to begin on either December 1 or January 1, depending on the sighting of the moon. The government of Iraq believes that carrying out the death penalty before the holiday will send a clear message. It will also provide closure to the victims of Saddam's regime and show that the new state of Iraq has power and control. So after the court's decision, plans for the execution were quickly set in motion. Iraqi officials, together with the U.S. military who still had custody of Saddam, worked together to arrange the transfer and carry out the execution. The legal documents were signed and security was tightened in critical areas, including the prison and the execution site. All preparations had to be done carefully, and the person who would carry out the execution was chosen. The judges and witnesses were contacted, and Saddam was informed that his appeal had failed, and it was here that he learned his death was near. On the night of December 29, while still at Camp Kamkropper, a U.S. military prison near Baghdad International Airport, he was told that his execution would take place the next morning, and that this would be the last night of his life. The former president was 69 years old, and after leading Iraq for almost 24 years, he would be executed by hanging. That night, the former president remained calm, but he became quiet. He no longer shouted or argued. According to those who saw him, he looked peaceful, but he was accepting the end. And he really did not cry or beg for mercy. He spent his last hours in prayer, reading the Quran, and writing letters. One of the letters was for his family, where he was saying goodbye. He passed on his last will to one of his lawyers, requesting a simple Islamic burial in his hometown of Al-Wajah, near Tikrit, where he was born. He requested to be buried next to his sons, Uday and Qusay, who were killed by U.S. forces in 2003 during an encounter in Mosul. He had no final request for forgiveness, and did not show any remorse for what he had done while he was in power. That night, the prison was very quiet. The American soldiers were on guard, and the Iraqi officials began to prepare the final step, the transfer of Saddam for his execution. According to Iraqi law itself, the hanging must take place before sunrise. In the early morning hours of December 30, 2006, around 3 a.m., the former president was officially transferred from U.S. custody to the Iraqi government. This was a legal step, with a signed document proving the transfer, and after this, the Americans no longer had control over Saddam. The former president was brought from Camp Kamkropper and was escorted under heavy security to the Iraqi military intelligence headquarters in the Qadamiyya district of Baghdad. And this building was turned into an execution site after Saddam's government was removed from power. The building is surrounded by armed guards, and outsiders are not allowed to come near. Inside, everything is ready. The wooden platform, the rope, and the noose. And many people are waiting for the execution. The Iraqi judges who worked on his trial are there. There are officials from the Ministry of Justice, and some religious clerics have also arrived. The executioners are already there, ready for their duty. Also inside the room are men who lost their families because of what Saddam did, especially those from Dujail. The former president is wearing a white shirt, a dark overcoat, and slippers with his hands tied behind his back. Before he disappeared, he was offered a black hood to cover his face, which is commonly used during executions. But the former president refused and said that he wanted to face death with his eyes open. At around 5:50 in the morning, the former president began to walk towards the execution site. There were 13 steps leading to the hanging platform, and he climbed them without any help. When he reached the top, the executioner placed the rope around his neck. While these things were happening, there were also some people in the room who began to shout. Some called out the name of Mustafa al-Sadr, a Shia cleric, whose father, Mohammed Sadiq al-Sadr, was killed by Saddam's forces in 1999. And there were also some who said bad things to Saddam. They did not fight back when Saddam shouted and told the people not to act like this. He reminded them that this was a legal moment of justice, not an opportunity for revenge. Then he began to recite the Shahada, the Muslim declaration of faith. But before he could finish the second line of the prayer, the trapdoor beneath his feet suddenly opened. Exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, local time, the former president was executed. And after that, the doctors approached and declared that he was truly gone the moment his body fell. His body remained hanging for several minutes. And this is part of the standard procedure to ensure that he was truly gone. After this, Saddam's body was flown to Al-Wajah, and he was buried in a simple grave inside the mosque that he himself had built. On December 31, his family and tribal leaders visited the burial site, The Iraqi government allowed this to prevent further conflict. Just a few hours after the execution, a mobile phone video surfaced online showing people taunting Saddam in his final moments. Some were chanting political slogans while others were laughing. Many Iraqis, even those who hated Saddam, were shocked. They said the execution seemed like revenge, not justice. The United Nations and human rights groups also closely watched and criticized the manner of the execution. And according to them, it was unprofessional and damaged the legal process. People worldwide have different opinions. Many believe that it is only right for the former president to be executed because of the terrible things he did while in power. One of the most tragic examples is the Halabja gas attack in March 1988, where his forces used chemical weapons against the Kurdish town of Halabja. About 5,000 civilians were killed, including women and children, and thousands more were injured. This is one of the worst chemical attacks in history against civilians. Following this, there was the incident in Dujail in 1982, which became the main case for his trial. The former president also led Iraq in two devastating wars. The Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988 claimed the lives of around 1 million people. In 1990, he invaded Kuwait, which started the Gulf War. This war led to international attacks on Iraq and left the country weakened and devastated. These wars, along with a brutal crackdown on anyone who opposed him, put the lives of many Iraqis in danger. That's why, for some, the death of the former president seems justified. They saw it as the final punishment for a man who caused so much pain and death. The families of the victims, especially the Kurdish and Shia Muslims who suffered the most in Iraq, said they have found closure. But not everyone really agreed. There are some who believe that the trial was rushed and not fair. Critics also said that this was more about revenge than true justice. They pointed out how Saddam was shouted at while being executed, and how the video of his death was leaked. This was done to stir public emotions. This did not look like a peaceful or respected legal process. According to some international lawyers and human rights groups, the trial did not meet fair standards. What happened after the former president was gone was even more alarming. Many believed that his removal would bring peace. However, Iraq became even more divided. The former president was a Sunni Muslim, and after he disappeared, the power of the Shia grew stronger. This caused severe sectarian strife between Sunnis and Shias that worsened over the years. Groups like Al-Qaeda in Iraq used the chaos to spread terrorism. Eventually, Al-Qaeda became the more dangerous group now known as ISIS. ISIS occupied large parts of Iraq and Syria from 2014 to 2017. This caused more war, death, and destruction. That's why, even without the former president, Iraq did not become peaceful or united. The problems continued, and the country kept struggling with terrorism, weak leadership, and deep divisions. For some, he got what he deserved, but for others, his absence opened the door to even more suffering.